Share. All right, guys. Happy Sabbath. Welcome. Blessed Sabbath. We're here to study Daniel 11, part 2, King of the North. Who's the King of the North? We want to get to truly who is this King of the North? Because it's mentioned in Daniel 11, and it's probably one of the most important prophecies of the book of Daniel. And we've been studying the book of Daniel quite frequently, and we want to really quite deeply here in the last few weeks, and we want to get into understanding these prophecies in their right light. We've looked at Daniel 7, Daniel 8, Daniel 9, Daniel 10, and broken these things down, and God has, I believe, brought us to a great understanding on this matter. But before we do, and we really get into the depth of this, let's ask our Father to be with us here. If we can, just bow your heads where you are. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for being with us. We know that you are such a gracious God and a loving and kind God, and that you are patient with us. Father, we also realize, however, that you have principles and standards that we are to stand up for. And Father, I pray that you would just give us a spirit, not a spirit that is true to your word. And I pray that each one would accept that spirit, that we would realize that he has given it to us. He's a good Father who gives good gifts, and he's given us the victory in all things. And we just pray, Father, for understanding that your words are true and you make good promises, and it's on us to take you at your word. And I pray these things all in Jesus' name, and thank you. Amen. All right, guys, King of the North. Who is the King of the North? This is going to be an interesting study. I want you to just consider some of the things that we've already looked at. Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Daniel 8, Daniel 11. And I'm just going to get, okay, just let me just move this down a touch if I can. Keeps popping back up. There we go. I think we got it. Okay, so we got OBS here and eSword. Okay, Daniel chapter 8 is going to be one that we've already looked at, and I'm just going to open it up here for 1 second. Some of you remember the kingdoms. Oops, that's Hosea. Daniel 8. We've got the kingdom of the Medo-Persian kingdom. That's what it starts with. This is going to start the 2300 days, which is going to be a ram with two horns, Medo-Persia. And then, of course, it meets into this other beast, which is the he-goat. Daniel 8:5, Daniel 8:22 tells us it's the Greek kingdom. And of course, in this kingdom, there was the horn would be split up, and when the horn was broken, there would be four other ones that would be split towards the four winds of heaven. And of course, we've got the four winds. We've got the south, we got the east, we got the west, and we got the north. And so, out of one of those horns is going to come a kingdom called the little horn. It's a little horn's going to come forth out of one of these horns, out of these four winds. As this kingdom is divided, Greece, there's going to be a northern horn that's going to come, and it's going to wax exceeding great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. Who is this horn that comes from the north? This is the papacy. This is Rome that's going to come out of the north, and it's going to wax towards the pleasant land. Now, this history, of course, is repeated. We talked about this Daniel 11 last week, where we saw the kings in Persia, which is in verse 2, and then this mighty king shall stand up in Greece. So we've got Daniel 8 and Daniel 11, very parallel. And we've got the list of kingdoms. We've got Medo-Persia, Greece, and then Rome. That's the study. That's the way Daniel always interprets the kingdom. We've got Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, Daniel 2. That's going to be your statue with the head of gold, the arms and chest of silver, belly and thighs of brass, and then the legs of iron. And then you've got the 10 toes or the iron and miry clay. That's your divided kingdom. That's Daniel 2. You've got those kingdoms. Daniel 7, you've got something similar. You've got the lion, which is Babylon. You've got the bear, which is the Medo-Persian kingdom. Then you've got the leopard, which is Greece. And then you've got this diverse beast with 10 horns, which is the divided kingdom of Rome. So you can see the order. It's Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. Same with Daniel 8. You get into Daniel 8 and you've got Medo-Persia. You don't have Babylon in this one, but you have Medo-Persia. Then you have Greece. And then you have this four divided kingdoms of Greece. And out of one of them comes from the northern kingdom, the Papal Empire, or the Roman Empire, which would eventually become the Papal Empire. And so those are the kingdoms. You got Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. And that's the order in all of those chapters. Now, Daniel 11 is really just a repeat and expansion of Daniel chapter 8. And we learned that last week. We were studying that. And there's certain points in Daniel 11, which we need to come to understand, to get down to these last points with regards to this king of the north, because this is an important point of the prophecy. But as you look at this Daniel 11 here, I'll bring you back to the screen. We've got the kingdom of Persia, and then we've got the kingdom of Greece that comes up next, Grecia. A mighty king stands up, which is going to be stand up, like Michael stands up. He takes the kingdom. He becomes the king of kings. Michael stands up, the prince, right? And this mighty king shall stand up. This is going to be referring to Alexander the Great. And he would rule with great dominion and do according to his will. Verse 4 says, when he shall stand up, his kingdom would be broken and divided toward the four winds of heaven. Where did we read about his kingdom being divided toward the four winds of heaven? Daniel chapter 8. We read already in Daniel chapter 8. You can go back, and if you actually look at these verses here, you'll get the references. Like you can go here, Daniel 8:8. You can see it right here on the right side, right? And you can look at it again. And it says, we can go, the he-goat waxed very great. He was strong, and when the great horn was broken, forth came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven. So that's the same as Daniel 11, verse 4. When he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken and divided toward the four winds of heaven. Four winds, north, south, east, and west. So you got four winds. And one of them came up that waxed toward the south, toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. Which direction did he come from? Came from the north, this king of the north. And so you'll see this in the book of Daniel, Daniel chapter 11. It's just repeating and expounding on this king of the north that's going to wax great, which is none other than the Roman Empire. So in verse 4, it says, not to his own posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled, talking about Greece. His kingdom shall be plucked up even for others beside those. And so it says the king of the south would be strong, and one of his princes shall be strong above him. And we went over a lot of this last week. I know there's lots we could do in regards to this, but this eventually, the northern kingdom became the Roman Empire. Now, I'm going to go down here to verse 29, and it says, at the time appointed, he would return and come toward the south, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter. Now, here we have this king of the north, and he wants to come toward the south. Verse 30 says, the ships of Chittim shall come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do, and he shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. Now, what does the covenant have to do with? Well, who is the mediator of the covenant? And I would like to have, if you guys can, I don't mind. I would like to have some participation in this. In this one, we can just comment in the chat or whatever. But who is the mediator of that covenant? And maybe I'll share some of these messages here as we go, just so we can get to the answers to these things as we're going. But mediator of the covenant, Jesus, right? Jesus is the mediator of the covenant. You can read about this in the book of Hebrews. Now, for us, there is how many gods and how many mediators, guys? There's one God and one mediator, right? That's what it says in 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 5. And the mediator, what is he doing? What's another word for mediator that we would call him? Like mediating. Who does mediating on our behalf? He's like, he would go into the sanctuary and mediate. Who was it that was, what was that man that kind of, he looked like Christ, Aaron was one of them. And same with his sons. They would be priests. Okay, priests. A priest is a mediator, right? The mediator of the covenant is also called the priest of the covenant, right? So this is your sanctuary. This is all part of the sanctuary message. So if you speak against the priest of the covenant, you're speaking against the holy covenant. All right? And that's what it says. I'm just going to open you a couple verses here. We'll go to the book of Hebrews chapter 7. Hebrews chapter 7. And we'll get down here talking about Jesus being compared to Melchizedek. Get to verse 18, and it says, there is verily a disannulling of the commandment going before the weakness and unprofitableness thereof. Actually, let's go down a bit more. And it says, thou art a priest after the order of Melchizedek. Now, by so much was Jesus made a surety of a better testament. Okay, surety, some people might not think that has to do with a mediator, but I do believe it does. But a better testament is a better covenant. And you see the relation here between the covenant and the priesthood right here? There's a priesthood and a covenant. And it says Jesus made a surety of a better testament. Well, Hebrews 12, you get down here to verse 24. Jesus is the mediator. You see the mediator here? What is he the mediator of? The covenant. Okay? So there's a connection between the mediator and the covenant. Catch this, because this is important to understand in the book of Daniel when you're looking at Daniel chapter 11, and also with regards to the daily. I'll show you what I mean here in a second. Because in verse 30 and 31, it says he would forsake the holy covenant. And he would have indignation against the holy covenant. You see that? You catching that? And then also, not just that, but verse 30, let's go down to verse 32. Such as do wickedly against the covenant. You see that? So the covenant. This guy has a problem with God's covenant, okay? And the covenant has to do with a high priest bringing his blood before the Father. So it all points to the sanctuary. The blood of the covenant, the blood of the everlasting covenant was shed for you, and he brings it before the Father. Now the covenant has to do with the priesthood, and that's what he's against. He's against the priesthood. So it says, listen to what it says next. Now, understanding all that, hopefully we got all that in our minds. It says armies would stand on his part. What does that mean? It means he's going to get some kind of arms of some sort to fight against the people. And he's going to fight against those people who really stand for one God, one mediator, the mediator of the covenant, Jesus, right? He's going to come against this teaching. I'm going to show you how he comes against this teaching as we continue today. But this is important for us to understand and see as we're reading the book. I'm just showing you what's in the book here, and then I'm going to show you how this all came to pass, okay? It's right here. It's telling us what's going to happen. And it says they would pollute the sanctuary of strength. Well, what is the sanctuary? What happens at the end of the 2300 days? It has to be cleansed, right? So who's polluting it? Is this little horn power, this king of the north power, this power that comes out of the north, waxes toward the west, toward the east, toward the promised land. And it says it shall take away the daily and place the abomination that maketh desolate. So here we see it takes away the daily. The word sacrifice is an added word here. It's not necessary to get to that. But the word daily here, another word for this, do you know what this word means? I'm going to show you what this means here. It's going to all connect you to the priesthood. Watch how it works, okay? The word daily, if we look it up in the Hebrew, we'll get down to verse 31, and I've got it in the Hebrew here, and we'll just go to it, and it says the Talmud. And if I was to do a quick search on this, just a quick search of the entire Bible to see what it means, I'll bring it up. And I lost that one. I don't know where my search bar went. There, nope. Nope. Get a lot of stuff here open. I was hoping I could just get it out for you, but I've lost my search bar. Okay, let me try the search again. Oh, I think you know what happened? Is my e-sword is acting up. There we go. It wasn't popping up. Okay. So now if we look up this word, Talmud, right, which is the word continual. It's daily right here. But you'll notice that it's used 103 times. You'll see it used like continually, right? Always is another word that's used for it. But basically, continual. The Lord is a priest continually. And you'll see that over and over again. It's the word continual. So the daily equals continual. You guys got that? Okay, I'm just going to write that down. And you'll notice it's always used in connection with the priesthood. Do you guys see that? How it's used in connection with God's priesthood? Now, what is Jesus? When we talk about the priesthood of Jesus, let's go back to Hebrews 7 for a sec. And it tells us something in regards to this priesthood. It says that he is, what does it say? He's a priest. What kind of priest is Jesus? Do you guys see what kind of priest he is right there? He's a priest continually, right? Continually. Now, when you look at the continual, you go to the book of Numbers, I'll show you something about the continual here. Numbers chapter 28, verse 4 and 5. The priest would go into the holy place daily. And it says, the one lamb shalt thou offer in the morning, the other lamb shalt thou offer in the evening. Okay? And then at the 10th part of the ephah, and flour, etc. And then it says, it is a continual burnt offering. What is this referring to here? This is talking about your daily. He would go in daily or continually. You see the connection there, the continual? And that is the priesthood right there. The priesthood that he would do is he'd offer these continually. It's a continual burnt offering. He is a priest continually. And so this is the continual or the daily that was done every day. Now he would go in daily into the first apartment of the sanctuary. But how often did he go into the second apartment of the sanctuary? No, this is not asking for forgiveness continually. He would go once per year. I'll come back to that question a little later on. But he would go into the second apartment once a year. Okay? Now let's just keep this in mind that on the Day of Atonement, he would go every year, but it wasn't like you had to be forgiven or give your sins every year. It was just a symbol that the priest did. Okay, now let's go back to the book of Daniel, chapter 11, verse 31. And we're looking at this, and he says, he shall take away the daily and then place the abomination that maketh desolate. We're going to look at the abomination that maketh desolate because Jesus told us, when you see and understand Daniel, you need to understand what the abomination that maketh desolate is. But it says in verse 32, such as do wickedly against the covenant. What are they against? You see that they're against the daily. They are against the sanctuary. They are against the covenant. And they are against the people. They are the people of God. The people of God. They want to destroy them, kill them by sword, famine, captivity. He that killeth with the sword shall die with the sword. He that leadeth into captivity. Right? There's your sword and there's your captivity right there. That's Revelation 13. There's a connection. It's the beast, the papacy, right? And spoil many days. Okay? But we're going to come back to this. We want to look at this and just continue this. This is the daily. You need to understand that this has to do with the sanctuary message. It has to do with the priest, Jesus, going in the sanctuary daily. You can see this in the book of Daniel, chapter 8, where it says, this little horn waxed great to the host of heaven, cast the host and some of the stars to the ground, stamped upon them. And he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily was taken away. What was taken away out of the sight of the people? If the daily is the continual of Christ, and Christ is in the first apartment of the sanctuary, what was taken out of the sight of the people? It was one God and one mediator, the mediator of the covenant. It was the mediator of the covenant. The covenant was taken from the people in their sight, right? Remember, he's against the covenant. He's doing wickedly against the covenant, against the mediator, against the daily. And what happens? The place of his sanctuary was cast out. So the sanctuary message, what is Jesus doing in the sanctuary? He's going in daily into the holy place, or it's the symbol of him going, he's in the holy place, right? In the first apartment of the sanctuary. Started his work in 31 AD when he went up to heaven and was anointed the holy place, as Daniel 9 talks about. Anointed the holy place. You'll see this in Daniel 9 where it says that, let's go down here. Some people think this has to do with Jesus being anointed, but it says he seals up the vision and the prophecy and anoints the most holy. Well, the word there is talking about the sanctuary. He anoints the sanctuary. He begins his work as the priest of the heavenly sanctuary at the end of the 70 weeks. And so that sanctuary was the one that was brought into view in 31 AD, and that's why it was polluted by the papacy, polluted by sin until it needed a cleansing in 1844 at the end of the 2300 days. So here we have Daniel 11:31. It's talking about arms shall stand on his part. We're going to look at this deeply and how he did take away the daily. This is something that you definitely want to understand. You don't want to be ignorant in regards to these issues, because if you're ignorant in regards to these issues, you probably will be ignorant in regards to what is really happening today with relation to the abomination of desolation. Okay? So we'll put this all in things. But this is something that we need to understand right now. Pope Francis is calling for giving the United Nations organization real teeth. I would say that army standing on his part at the end of time, the United Nations are going to stand on the part of the papacy. And we'll look at this and continue this. But Pope calls for UN with teeth. This is all over the internet. This is just over the last couple weeks here. And UN Secretary General calls for global governance with teeth. Same thing. And teeth, when you think of teeth, you know, the beast has teeth. What kind of teeth did the beast in Daniel 7 have? Iron teeth, right? Irony. It's anyways, it's really the beast here that's going to have power. And when you see in Revelation chapter 13, it has the mouth of a lion and teeth. You know, what does it do with its teeth? It eats. It devours much flesh, the Bible says. But I want to go back. We're going to break down some things that were spoken of by Daniel, because Jesus told us to understand when you see the signs spoken of by Daniel the prophet. Now, Jesus in Matthew 24 talks about this, but in verse 3, he starts with this. He says, he sat upon the Mount of Olives. The disciples came to him privately, saying, tell us, what shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of your coming and of the end of the world? So there's going to be a sign of the end that's going to be given to God's people. And it's going to be, Jesus likens what happened to Jerusalem. He has a prophecy here in Matthew 24. He likens what happens to Jerusalem to what happens to the people at the end of the world. And what happened to Jerusalem? Well, it was burnt with fire, okay? We'll come to that. We're going to look at the Bible here. But there's a sign of his coming, and he does not want us to miss this. He says this, he says, when you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. And if you don't see it, you know, it's like going through a stop sign. You could get in a very bad accident. You want to understand this. And this is, I'm going to make this very simple to understand tonight. This is not a complicated thing to understand. So if you want to understand it and you want to know it, Jesus makes it known. The question is, do we want to understand it? Sometimes, you know, sometimes we're too busy. Sometimes we don't want to understand certain things. So a lot of people have a lot of things going on in their minds and life. And a lot of people will, you know, say, oh, I nobody knows. No, it's not important or whatever. Jesus said, know and understand. Because there's certain instructions that he gives to his people at this time. He says, when you see this, you know, do this, do this. Prophecy is given so that you can take heed. And a failure to understand and know is going to be a failure to do what he instructed you to do at this time, which is, you know, flee out of Judea, maybe come out of something else. We'll look at come out of the cities, I would say. I think that there's a real message here that God would have us to know, and I'll show you as we continue here. But when Jesus talks about this sign of the end, he likens it to what happened to Jerusalem in 70 AD when it was burnt with fire. And you know, if you're in the city at a certain point in time in this end of age, it's not going to be good for people in the cities. It's going to be a very difficult time. That's why Jesus gives you the warning and he tells you, know and understand, don't miss this point. Because if you don't follow the instruction that I give you, well, certain destruction, you know, is going to result. And with regards to the cities, in 70 AD, there was not one Christian lost in that destruction of Jerusalem. And I think it's going to be very similar at the end of time here. But God would have us to know. Anyways, keeping this in mind, why was it burnt with fire? What did it do? Well, Leviticus 21 tells us, the daughter of any priest, if she profane herself by playing the whore, she profaneth her father, she shall be burnt with fire. And when we put this in a spiritual prophetic context, right? There's a real symbology behind this. We look at a woman as symbolizing the church, and you know, fornication. Well, who does the whore of Babylon fornicate with? Bible says, it says she's committed fornication with the kings of the earth, right? And so what happens to the whore of Babylon? Her judgment is she is burnt with fire. That's what it says in Revelation chapter 17. So this is why she's burnt with fire, is because she's united with the kings of the earth. The church has went to the state. Church and state union is something that we should understand as a judgment that causes her to be burnt with fire. So when Jerusalem was burnt with fire, it was burnt with fire because it said, we have no king but Caesar. They chose the world. They chose Rome as their king. And when they chose the Roman Empire as their kings and rejected Christ, they went to the state power and they used the state power to crucify and hang Jesus on a cross. And by doing so, this was what brought the judgment against her, was that union of church and state. Okay? So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Leviticus 21:9. She shall be burnt with fire. That's what the judgment was. But Revelation 17:16 says the 10 horns shall make her desolate. When you understand what the 10 horns are, Revelation 17:16 talks about a union of church and state. It talks about kings. I'm just going to open it up a little bit for you. I'm going to show you in the Bible here just briefly because we want to watch for an abomination that maketh desolate. And this woman, she's the mother of harlots and she's the mother of abominations. Okay, don't miss that point. And she's holding in her hand a cup full of abominations. And it's the overspreading of abomination that maketh desolate. That's what Daniel 9 says, okay? So there's going to be so many abominations that the entire abominable stuff that's going on right now, like LGBT, abortions, all this other stuff, and it's going on in the church. I mean, it's not even just going on in the world right now. Like look at our Adventist church right now. Just look at that today, and it's all in there, right? Those are abominations. And this is what brings the judgments on the world, is when the church falls and the church turns to all these abominations. So we've got this mother church, which is the mother of abominations. And let's just go to verse 16 now. Keep this in mind. The 10 horns, which thou sawest on the beast. What are the 10 horns? Verse 12 tells us. The 10 horns, which you saw, are 10 kings. And what does she do with the kings? Let's go to verse 2. It says, with whom the kings have committed fornication with the woman, right? The woman. I will show you the judgment of the great whore. Why is she judged? Because she's fornicating with the kings of the earth. Okay? Church and state union. What does it bring? Verse, there's wine of her fornication, which is also mentioned as filthiness of her fornication, which is also mentioned as the blood of martyrs, which is in the cup. And this is all what comes from her fornication. Her church and state union is martyrs, death of God's people. So verse 16 says, the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these shall hate the whore and make her desolate. Now there's your words right there that you're looking for. But you're looking for an abomination that makes desolate, right? And not only that, but it's going to make her naked as well. It says it makes her naked. What are the kings of the earth doing with her? They're fornicating with her. They're getting her naked. That's what it says right there. They make her naked. They make her desolate. And then what happens? She shall be burnt with fire. And what does Leviticus 21:9 talk about? We said if she plays the harlot, the daughter of any priest, she shall be burnt with fire. So this is the judgment for playing the harlot. And who did she play the harlot with? The 10 horns of the kings. So she's desolate because of going to the kings of the earth. The 10 horns, church and state union, is an abomination that makes desolate. Watch, I'll show you some more examples here. I want to go into the scriptures. I want to break this down. This is not something that should be overlooked, because a lot of people wouldn't even see what makes her desolate. They would just overlook it. But no, it's the 10 horns. It's the church and state union that makes her desolate. Ezekiel 16. Now remember Ezekiel chapter 8, 9, some of you might, talks about all the abominations in the temple. Then it talks about people crying and sighing for the abominations that are done in the church, and they were going to be the ones that receive the seal of God. But Ezekiel 16, he comes along and he says, Son of man, cause Jerusalem to know her abominations. In other words, let's make the church know what really is abominable. And a lot of people don't know what are abominations, but abominations, the church is causing and doing abominations. And what is one of those abominations? Let's go down a bit to verse 15. And it says, thou did trust in thine own beauty and played the harlot because of thy renown. So is playing the harlot an abomination? It is, right? How about playing the harlot with the kings of the earth? It's an abomination. How about with the 10 horns? It's an abomination that makes her desolate. You see? So the 10 horns make her desolate. Revelation 17:16. The abomination that make it desolate has to do with those 10 horns, which are the kings of the earth, which is basically, it's a church and state union. Okay? So when you're looking at what is the abomination that make it desolate, you have to understand it has to do with the church and state union. She's going to use the state power for something. She's going to unite with the state to do something. I'm going to share with you what this is and exactly what causes the desolation. Because the Bible gives us the answers. I'm not giving you private interpretation or anything like that. I'm giving you the Bible. I'm showing you the verses that actually tell us about these things, okay? So, fornication with the kings of the earth. Church and state union is an abomination. This is one of the abominations. Ellen White spoke about the sign of the end. She talked about a sign that would happen at the end, and it has to do with church and state union. She said when Protestantism or apostate Protestantism would stretch her hand across the gulf to grasp the hand of the Roman power, when she would stretch over the abyss to clasp hands with spiritualism, when under the influence of this threefold union, our country would repudiate every principle of this Constitution as a Protestant and Republican government and make provision for the propagation of papal falsehoods and delusions, then we may know that the time has come for the marvelous working of Satan and that the end is near. Now I'm going to ask you guys, I'm going to put you all on the spot right now, and hopefully somebody can answer me. But where does it talk about the sign of the end? What chapter? And I've already given the answer in this study, so I'm hoping that somebody will tell me. Where does it talk about the sign of the end? Matthew 24. Good. Good. What shall be the sign of your coming and of the end of the world? That was the disciples, right? Amen. Perfect. Okay. So what do you think she's talking about in this context here? Do you guys see the words right here up on the screen? That the end is near. She says, as the approach of the Roman armies was a sign to the disciples of the impending destruction of Jerusalem, so may this apostasy be a sign to us that the limit of God's forbearance is reached. So what's, according to Ellen White, she says that there's going to be a sign of the end. And what does that sign of the end, what is it going to be? What is it going to be? Does it have to do with Rome, the papacy? It does, doesn't it? Now, this sign of the end that has to do with the threefold union, if this sign of the end has to do with the Roman power clasping hands with apostate Protestantism, then where in the book of Daniel do we find this sign? That's what we're going to look at tonight. Because Jesus said that this sign of the abomination of desolation was written in the book of Daniel, Matthew 24:15. And it's important not just to see it in the book of Revelation. I showed you in Revelation, but Revelation points you to Daniel, its sister book. The counterfeit Sabbath is part of what they use to enforce, yes, their authority. But there's a sign before that is given, and the sign has to do with the union and the assumption of power that is given to this power. And that's what the papacy does. And so it gives you a sign before it actually enforces the law. Listen, I'll show you a little bit more as we continue, okay? Revelation 16:12 says this. It says, the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and thereof the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. Now, some of you remember in Daniel chapter 5, the water of the Euphrates was dried up. Who came and dried up the water of the Euphrates? The kings of the east, which would have been the Medo-Persian Empire. Now in Revelation 16:12, there's another king of the east. And you can see who this kings of the east is. I'm going to share with you what this symbolizes. But a lot of people are looking at the Middle East right now, and they're waiting for the drying up of the river. And when this dries up, they believe that this is going to be what is going to be the sign. But Ellen White called this a sign. You'll notice the threefold union. It's actually mentioned in Revelation 16. And I'm going to show you where this is mentioned. Let's go to Revelation 16 for a sec. Revelation 16, 12, 13, 14 tells us the sixth angel poured his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. And I saw three unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the false prophet, and out of the mouth of the beast. So we have threefold union here. We've got the beast, we've got the false prophet, and we've got the dragon. Spiritualism is the dragon, the beast is the papacy, and the false prophet is apostate Protestantism. And so when we're looking at this quote from Ellen White, and you go back here, she says, when Protestantism grasps the hand of the Roman power and reaches over to clasp the hand of spiritualism, under this threefold union, this would be a sign to us that the limit of God's forbearance is reached. Now, what happens when a river loses all its water? What's another word for this? Anybody know what that word is? It's in the Bible. When a river loses its water, it is left what? It's actually, the word is desolate. It's desolate. And I can show you this. I'll show you, I think I'm trying to think of one verse that I can come to mind. Joel chapter 1, I believe. Hopefully it has the word in there. I'm not sure if it does though. I just have to double check. But desolate means empty. It's empty. The waters thereof are dried up. The rivers thereof are dried up. The fire burned the trees. I'm trying to see here. I know it says desolate in this chapter. Maybe it's chapter 2 where it talks about it. I was hoping I could show it to you quickly because I didn't want to go too far into this. You might have to do some search on your own, guys. I might have to, I'll move the northern army. Land is barren and desolate. There you go. The land is barren and desolate. It means empty, right? I'm sure most of you would know that it means empty or desolate. So when we look at Revelation chapter 16 and we're looking at this river here, it's dried up. So what does that imply? Desolation, right? Desolation is here, okay? And so the abomination that maketh desolate has happened, and that has to do with the threefold union, which is the sign spoken of by Daniel. And you'll see the connections, okay? I'm just connecting some dots. Hopefully you're catching them all. There's a lot there. But when you see this, what is about to come is Jesus said, behold, I come as a thief. Where does he write about coming as a thief? What chapter is that in? And, he blesses he that watches and keeps his garments, watches, keeps his house, right? What chapter? Yeah, but particular chapter, there's talking about a thief. He's coming like, and they know not the hour, day or hour is coming, and all that other stuff is in the chapter. Revelation 3 is one of them. I would say that Matthew 24 is a big one, right? Matthew 24, you guys are familiar with that. Let's just connect this because we want to connect Revelation 16, the threefold union, to Matthew 24 because that's what Ellen White connected it to. She connected the threefold union to the sign of the end. So let's go to Matthew 24, verse 43. I think 43 would be good. Watch ye therefore. You know not what hour your Lord does come, but know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would not have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. So he's definitely coming. Now, in verse 27, it tells us what direction he would be coming from. What direction is he coming from when he comes as a thief? You guys see what direction he's coming from there? I've got the verse highlighted. He's coming from the east. Okay, so let's go back to... I should have put that back to Revelation 16. And just keep that in mind because Revelation 16 tells you that the sixth angel pours his vial upon the river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. And so then it says he's coming as a thief. Which way is he coming from? He's coming from the east. And so here we have this abomination that maketh desolate comes, which is spoken of by Daniel the prophet. It's also spoken of in Matthew 24. And this is spoken of in Matthew 24, the east. And that's, sometimes people call that the Eastern question. I don't think, sometimes I think we've lacked in our study of this issue though, and we don't let the Bible interpret itself. Now let me come back to Daniel 11 here. Daniel 11 talks about this as well. In verse 44, he says, tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. What's another word for tidings? Anybody know what that word is? It's It's the news. It's the news out of the east. And Jesus coming from the east. And so this has to do with his second coming. Now you go back to Matthew 24, and Matthew 24 is telling you in verse 15 that there's something spoken of by Daniel, the abomination of desolation. But right before this, he says this gospel of the kingdom would be preached in all the world. Now, what does the word gospel mean? Does anybody know what that means? It's the same word as tidings. It means news, but good news, right? So the good news, and what direction is it coming from? Verse 27, as lightning cometh out of the east. So where is this tidings coming from? Tidings is coming from the east. It's coming from Jesus, you see? And so the kings of the east might be prepared. And another example of this is Isaiah 45, and I'm not going to go, this is where I'm going to stop here. Is this one part. Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus. Cyrus was the king of the Persian Empire. And that was when they conquered Babylon. They dried up the river Euphrates, and that was how they entered into the city. But Cyrus is only a type. It's only a type of a greater Cyrus, because the word here, anointed, is the word Meshiach. In Hebrew, it's Meshiach. In Greek, it means Christ. That's what this verse means. It means to his Christ, to Cyrus. So who is it talking to? Thus saith the Lord to Christ, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him. Cyrus was only a symbol of Christ. You can look it up. It's Meshiach, or Messiah, which is the Christ. John 1. Okay? So that's talking about Christ. And Christ is coming from the east. The kings of the east, the Persian Empire came from the east. It dried up the river Euphrates, and that's a symbol of Jesus' second coming. It's all a symbol of Jesus' second coming. And that threefold union in the drying up of the river Euphrates is a symbol of drying up the Spirit of God. It's God's Spirit being withdrawn from the earth, like it was in the days of Noah. Matthew 24 again, right? So know this, that if the good man of his house had known what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. There's a connection to the thief and a connection to Revelation 16 and Matthew 24. Right? We've been over all these verses and seen these things. I'm going to move on here a little bit. And I want to go into some other stuff regarding this man of sin. Now, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3 and 4, talks about a man. It says, this is what Paul says. He says, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he is God, sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Now, here is Paul speaking of somebody who is in prophecy, and he's saying this man of sin who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God. Now, where is this man written of? Where do we see a man who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God? It's in Daniel chapter 11. And it says in verse 36 that this king would do according to his will. He would exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, speak marvelous things against the God of gods, prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined is done. It's talking about the papacy. It's talking about the Pope. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women. They can't get married, the priesthood, right? Nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above all. That's exactly the words of Paul the Apostle. Of course, this king doing according to his will and exalting himself and magnifying himself, speaking marvelous things against the God of gods, he's going to do something else. I'm going to show you what this is in a second. We're going to get down to verse 38, 39. But Daniel 7:25 speaks of him also. And it's just, again, repeating. He speaks great words against the Most High. See, that's the same words that it says in Daniel 11. He will speak marvelous things against the God of gods. And then he wear out the saints of the Most High and think to change times and laws. That's Daniel 11:36. It's the same thing. But it's the papacy, changing the Sabbath. And then the people are given into his hands till time, dividing of time, which would be the dark ages. But this is mentioned right here in Daniel 11, verse 36. The king would speak great words against the Most High. think to change times and laws. You don't want to miss this, because this is the same power here. And he does not regard any god, the God of his fathers, or any god, except for in his estate he honors this God of forces. And the word there, forces, or uses force to enforce this God. A God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold, silver, with precious stones and pleasant things. I'll come to this. I'm going to come to this in a second, okay? Just keep this all in mind. He's doing this with a strange God, it says, in the strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. That's what it says in verse 38, 39. A God whom his fathers knew not. This is a God who's definitely something that is not what his fathers knew. Now, in 508 AD, there was something that took place with regards to one of those 10 horns. One of those 10 horns would have been the Franks. The Franks were one of the 10 horns, and this union of church and state took place, which is also what makes the papacy desolate, guys. Do you remember? What would make the papacy desolate according to Revelation 17:16? Everybody remember what it was? That something makes her desolate. The verse says the 10 horns would make her desolate, right? Which are going to be the 10 kings, which are going to be the kings of the earth, okay? Church and state union. So here we have Clovis giving power, or given power by the papacy, and giving power over to the papacy. And how did he do it? Well, it says the bloody course of Clovis, glorified by the Catholic writers as the triumph of the Orthodox doctrine of the Trinity over Arianism. Now, what is the Trinity, guys? It's a God, right? Is it not? Is the Trinity a God? Okay. So there's a God that's going to be exalted here. You see that? By the papacy. This God is called the Trinity. Now, this God is going to be exalted. I'll show you what it says. In the Justinian Code, when the Ostrogoths were uprooted, there was a code that was written from Justinian, the emperor, to all the other emperors, and he said, concerning the most exalted Trinity. What kind of God is this? This God was an exalted God. It was the most exalted Trinity. And the Catholic faith in providing that no one shall dare to publicly oppose them. Did he use force? Do you think he used force to put away people who didn't agree with him? Now, in 508 AD, the Arian tribe, which was non-Trinitarian, they were called Arian tribes. They didn't believe in the Trinity. These tribes were forced out of countries. The Visigoths were forced into Spain. Most of them were uprooted and destroyed. And then, of course, in 538 AD, the Ostrogoth kingdom was completely destroyed, which brought the Justinian Code. This was the third of 3 tribes. They destroyed the Vandals as well. And out of these tribes, after these tribes were destroyed, there was this God that became highly exalted. And it was forced on the people. And the people were not allowed to worship any other God but this. In this code, it was said that if anybody should dare to worship any other God and worship any other way, they were to be forced out of the cities with relentless violence. That's what the code said. They were to be killed. They were not to be given any mercy. They killed the Ostrogoths. They killed the Vandals. They killed millions of people during the Dark Ages. Millions. And it was based on this worship of this God. This God was what they used to kill people. This is the code that was enforced in 538 AD until 1798, when its power was finally taken away. This is what the power was that took place. And it had to do with this God. And what does the Bible say about this God? Let's go to the Bible here. And it says, in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, a God whom his fathers knew not, shall he honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and pleasant things. How many people ever saw Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob speak of the Trinity? Did Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the fathers, know of the Trinity? Did they know the Trinity? How about David, King David? Does anybody ever see David speak of the Trinity? Moses speak of the Trinity? Any of the prophets speak of the Trinity anywhere? This is really the only prophet that did speak of the Trinity, and it was Daniel. And Daniel says, regarding the papacy, that he would do this in the most strongholds, thus shall he do, that's the papacy, in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. What was the words that the Justinian Code said? Concerning the most exalted Trinity. To exalt means to increase with glory. That's exactly the same wording as the Justinian Code. Exalted Trinity. That's what Justinian wrote. Those are Justinian's word. And then the Bible explains it this way. He would increase it with glory, this God. And he would cause them or use them to rule over many. What did he do to the Ostrogoths, guys? What did he do to the Visigoths? What did he do to the Vandals? Did he use this God to destroy them? Did he force people out of the cities with relentless violence? Yes. And he divided the land for gain. In other words, he made money off of this. But it says that that's the God that was exalted. So when we're looking at this, concerning the most exalted Trinity, this is what was used during the Dark Ages. And that's what Daniel 11, 36 to 39 is speaking of. And it says that the king would do these things with this God, that it spoke marvelous things against the God of gods. It does not worship the true God. It destroyed the sanctuary message. When you look at the book of Ezekiel, Ezekiel tells you of an abomination that would be committed. Let's just go to Ezekiel for 1 second, keeping this all in mind. Ezekiel chapter 8 and verse 14, he says, Then said he unto me, O son of man, turn thee yet again, thou shalt see greater abominations than these. And he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house, and behold, at the door of the temple Lord, between the porch and the altar, were 25 men with their backs toward the temple Lord, and their faces toward the east, and they worship the sun toward the east. But just picture this, okay? They've got their backs to the temple. Inside of that temple is a throne. Remember Daniel 7? There was a throne, and one who was like unto the Ancient of Days that sat on this throne. And what did it have on the side of it? It had a priest. Jesus, one like the Son of Man, came in to the most holy place. Okay, on the Day of Atonement, right? That would be the Day of Atonement that he came into the Father. That was the judgment scene. Now there's only one sitting on the throne, and that's the Ancient of Days. One God, the Father, and one mediator between God and men. That's Christ Jesus. When you look to the sanctuary, you see one God and one mediator. When you turn your back to the sanctuary and look toward the sun, well, let me tell you something about the sun, okay? In regards to ancient Babylon, there was a woman named Semiramis. She's sometimes known as Ishtar or Easter. Easter is another word we translate it to. She's called the fertility goddess. And it said that how she became the fertility goddess was that her husband was Nimrod, the founder of ancient Babel, the Tower of Babel. You can read about him in Genesis chapter 10 and 11. And that tower was built up by Nimrod and other things. He died, and when he died, she said he was glorified and deified as the sun god, and he went to live in the sun. But she says he came down out of the sun and impregnated her, and she had an immaculately conceived this son, and the son's name was Tammuz. And that's what you see in the verses above. Women weeping for Tammuz. Churches. Counterfeit son of God. See? We're worshiping another Jesus. That's what Tammuz is another Jesus. A lot of people would say, you go to the Catholic Church, you see those pictures of Mary, and you see those statues of Mary and Jesus. That's Tammuz. That's Ishtar. That's not Mary and Jesus. That's Babylonian worship. And that's where it comes from. And Tammuz's birthday is December 25th, if you go Google it. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And so, anyways, this is an abomination. But this is the further abomination is to turn your back to the temple and worship this other God. So the overspreading of abominations brings the judgment. Ezekiel 9:4 tells us that the glory of the God of Israel was gone up. Spreading of abominations makes it desolate. And abominations make desolate. And then the judgments come. Go through the city and smite Jerusalem. We're in the time where we're about to see judgments coming on the church. We are so close to that time. But let me keep going here. I want to keep going a little bit regarding this. This is the strange God. This is the counterfeit worship system. And this all comes from turning away from the sanctuary. And that's what's happened. And what do you think has happened in regards to modern day Adventism right now? We've turned from the true God. We've changed the gods we worship. It's all documented. It's all documented. You can look at what the pioneers of Adventism believed, and you can see for sure they did not worship a Trinity, even despite what a lot of people are trying to say today. The Trinity is from Babylon. It is a Babylonian concept. It comes from ancient Babylon, from Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz. And so that's a strange god, and that was adopted by the churches, and it was forced into belief, and it was forced on the people, and they used this god to persecute the saints during the Dark Ages. And that's why it says in Daniel 11:36, he speaks great things against the God of gods, but he worships a strange god, and he increases this god with glory. He concerning the most exalted Trinity. No one should dare to publicly speak against it. That's what the rule of the land was. But anyways, in Great Controversy, page 50, she talks about the papacy, this man that does according to his will, the man of sin. And you'll see that it says this compromise between paganism and Christianity resulted in the development of the man of sin, foretold in prophecy as opposing and exalting himself above God. That gigantic system of false religion is a masterpiece of Satan's power, a monument of his efforts to seat himself upon the throne to rule the earth according to his will. And so I want you to notice the words according to his will. A lot of people don't realize that this is speaking of this same man in Daniel 11:36. And I want you to catch this, okay? It says, the king shall do according to his will. He would exalt himself, magnify himself above every god. She's quoting this, okay? And she's saying this is the papacy. But you know, in Adventism today, we're having a little issue with regards to this. Because some people are saying this is not the papacy, this is actually France. And I don't know about you guys, but I run into this a lot, okay? And you will run into this too. But this is not France, this king that does according to his will. It's not France. It's the next power after the Grecian Empire. It's the king of the north. It's the papacy. And this king is none of the, he exalts this strange god. This is the Trinity. So why is Adventism trying to take us and redirect us off of these things today? Well, they do have some quotes from Uriah Smith and others that they go by. But I think that it's important for us to let the Bible interpret itself. Sometimes I will say Uriah Smith is right on in many, many respects, okay? And he even got it right with the Trinity. But with respect to this point here, he missed the boat. And he left off in regards to Daniel 11:36 onwards, and he doesn't get the full understanding of it. And with me, I go with Ellen White. I say this is the man that does according to his will is the papacy. Uriah Smith goes over here and he says it's France. And from verse 36, verse 37, verse 38, verse 39, verse 40 to 45 onward, I don't agree with Uriah Smith. Once he hits verse 36, I take another path, right? And I know a lot of people think that, you know, Uriah Smith wasn't wrong. He was wrong. Ellen White says the man that does according to his will is the papacy, or is the papacy. This is who it is, the king that exalts himself. This is the king that does according to his will. Great Controversy, page 50, paragraph 1, right? That's who it is. But it's not what's written in Daniel and the Revelation. I know some people think that, you know, David, you're wrong, but a lot of people I don't think have looked very closely. I don't think they look very closely. Sometimes they're like, this book's got to be right because Ellen White actually recommended the book. That's not how things work. You know, she recommended books from Sunday keepers that had stuff that was contrary to the gospel even in them. That doesn't mean that it's infallible because she recommended it, you know? Anyways, I'm going to keep going. I'll come back to that point a little bit more. I think I'll just briefly talk about it. But no, it wasn't infallible. Even Willie White and Uriah Smith went back one day and corrected over 300 errors in that book in one day. And it's documented. It was not, you know, total infallibility or anything like that. That's definitely not how it works, okay? Daniel is talking about these powers, and you'll see James White, he talks about it. He says, look, it's going to be Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and all these chapters. And then suddenly we've got Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and Daniel 8. And then we've got Medo-Persia, Greece, and then France and Turkey. That's Daniel 11, it's totally missed the mark. No, that's not right. But anyways, let's come back here. Just keep these words in mind. Look at the Bible. He exalts himself and magnifies himself above every god, speaks marvelous words against the God of gods. Daniel 7:25, he speaks great words against the Most High. It's the papacy. This is the one who does according to his will. It's the papacy. And Daniel 11:40 continues on. And it's important for us not to miss these points, because what we're going to get to is what happens in the next verses. And I'm going to talk about this tomorrow in even greater detail and go into CBDCs and other things like that are coming. But anyways, verse 40, at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north would come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, with horsemen, and with many ships, and he'd enter into countries and shall overflow and pass over. Now let me show you something from the Bible here. I want to show you some points in regards to the Bible about the king of the north coming like a whirlwind, and how this is a symbol of the abomination of desolation. Just go and look at our Bibles. Matthew 24. Matthew 24, there was instructions given, guys. What were the instructions to do when we see the abomination of desolation? What were we instructed to do? You can see it in Matthew 24:16. When you see this, then let them which in Judea be in Judea flee into the mountains. When you see the 10 horns make her desolate, flee out of Babylon. Get out of town, right? But flee into the mountains. Okay, come out of Judea, right? Come out of Judea, my people, right? When you see the abomination of desolation, when you see this. Now, what was it that was the abomination of desolation according to Jeremiah? Jeremiah said to flee out, but he shows you something that you're going to see. Let's go to the book of Jeremiah, chapter 6, and you'll see. It says right here that we are to flee out of the midst of Jerusalem. Gather yourselves to flee. Why? Because there's something that you can see. It's a sign to you as God's people to understand and know, when you see this, come out of her, my people. And so it says, blow the trumpet in Tekoa, set up a sign of fire in Bethakram, for evil appears out of the north and great destruction. There's your sign right there. Has to do with the king of the north. And he's doing something. What is he doing? Well, evil appears out of the north. Did Daniel write about this? Daniel wrote about a king of the north. But this king, if we go back to the book of Daniel, let's go back to Daniel 11, verse 40, and read this again. It says, at the time of the end, would the king of the south push him, the king of the north would come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, and many ships. When we see the papacy gathering armies, what is this a symbol of? The armies, the world, they're getting chariots, horsemen, many ships. Revelation 17, 10 horns. It's the 10 horns. Has to do with the 10 horns. That's armies. Horsemen, chariots, ships, getting armies. Armies would stand on its part, right? That's like what happened in verse 31. In 508 AD, armies would stand on his part, and this 10 horns, which included France, maketh desolate. Okay? Same thing in verse 40. Armies stand on his part. Chariots, horsemen, and many ships would stand on his part. And this is the 10 horns that make her desolate. Now, he would enter countries and overflow and pass over. Let's just take a look at this a little bit more. Daniel 11:40. We want to know the king of the north coming like a whirlwind. Let's go back to Jeremiah for a second. Jeremiah chapter 6. So it says, when we flee out of the midst of Jerusalem, we're going to see the king of the north coming. And he says, I've likened the daughter of Zion to a comely and delicate woman. Revelation chapter 12 will give you some identity of who the army would come. Army, 10 horns. Does the dragon have 10 horns in Revelation 12? He does. The 10 horns coming and making war and surrounding Jerusalem, the woman, the mother of us all. That's a symbol to us to flee out of Judea. I'll come back to that. But Jeremiah chapter 4, it says, set up the standard toward Zion and stay not, for I will bring evil from the north and a great destruction. Now, evil from the north. Jeremiah knew of this evil coming from the north. Who was coming from the north, guys? What kingdom was it that was coming from the north? Is it talking about Turkey? Not Turkey, right? It's Babylon. Okay, Babylon. When we read about Babylon, and the 10 horns make her desolate. We read about the abomination of desolation in Revelation chapter 17. So this mother Babylon, church Babylon, is going to do something very similar at the end of time. She's going to gather something. Let's go down to, well, let's read verse. What's he going to do? Make your land desolate. Your cities shall be laid waste without an inhabitant. That's important to understand because he wants you to flee out of Judea, flee out of the cities. Come out of the cities. Come out of her, my people. We don't want to miss this sign. When we see the 10 horns getting power over the papacy, we don't want to miss this. And if we don't get the sign, if we wait till the Sunday law comes and it's all enforced, is it too late? Or do we want to see the sign before that happens? Would you not want the sign before all that is enforced and the destruction comes, right? You want to know, out of the city. That's your sign. Get out of the city, right? You don't want to miss this. But look at verse 13. Behold, he shall come up as clouds, and his chariots shall be as a whirlwind. His horses are swifter than eagles. Woe to us, for we are spoiled. So the king of the north is coming like a whirlwind. He's coming with chariots, with horsemen, and with many ships. He's got his armies. King of the north is none other than Babylon. It's the papacy, and the 10 horns make her desolate. So the abomination that make it desolate has to do with someone coming out of the north. And there's going to be a sign to us to get out of the city, flee out of Judea. Very similar to what happened in AD 70. And it has to do, Ellen White said the sign of the end was the threefold union. She didn't say it had to do with Turkey. The sign of the end spoken of by Daniel had to do with a threefold union. And we have to not miss this point. We have to not miss this point. I'm going to share with you something. See, this is Luke 21:20, and I have a woman standing on the moon. That's Zion. Zion. I've likened Zion to a delicate and comely woman. And that would be Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 1. They're to flee out of Judea, but only when you see the king of the north coming. And so it says here in Luke 21:20, when you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. And clearly there was a sign given in 70 AD, or to get out of the city. 67 AD was actually when the sign was. But in relation to this, it was 3 years before the destruction came. So they had time to get out beforehand, right? You definitely want to see the sign before the destruction comes. Does that make sense? So God's going to give us a sign before the destruction comes and before they're really forced in. And that's what he does for us. He's a God of mercy. He gives us time to get out. He says, come out over my people. Flee out of Judea. Come out of Babylon, because there's something coming here. 10 horns. United Nations. Some of you, I'm going to share with a map tomorrow. Maybe I'll share a little bit of it tonight here. But the 10 horns shall make her desolate. It's not something you want to miss. We saw it would happen in 508 with Clovis, and we're going to see the same thing today. I'm going to share with you how it happens today. So at the time of the end, it's after 1798. Some of you know that and understand that the king of the south would push at him, which I believe to be France, and the king of the north would come against him. The word against him is added there. It should just say, he shall come like a whirlwind with chariots, horsemen, many ships. He'd enter into the countries and overflow and pass over. So that's the king of the north, Babylon, right? Very similar to Jeremiah. Jeremiah helps us interpret Daniel. We should not, where do you think Daniel comes up with a lot of this king of the north stuff and all this other stuff? Where does Daniel and Jeremiah come up with this? God gives it to both of them. They're not going to speak different things in regards to who the king of the north is. But this is what is the cause of the judgment. I'll show you the judgment of the great whore, sits on many waters, who has committed fornication with the kings of the earth. On September 25th, 2015, the Pope was in New York addressing the United Nations. But there was more that happened here. Also, the day before was the Day of Atonement, Day of Judgment, so to say. And he was sitting in the Congress of the United States, an actual United States that is supposed to uphold the First Amendment. It's a Protestant government. Now, when you have the papacy inside of that Protestant government, you're not really protesting or Protestant anymore. Sounds like a Ganoon Diop kind of fail, right? It's not really what you're supposed to be. Religious liberty director tells us that the papacy is actually one of the ways in which we're going to understand what religious liberty is through the foe of religious liberty, the Catholics. But when you look at the visit, when it came to New York City, it says gather, which I believe gathering chariots, horsemen, and ships. It's to do with gathering the army standing on its part. Really, they're just giving us a sign. And a lot of people, when they saw this, were like, oh man, something bad's coming out of this. A lot of people, when they came up to this date, there was all kinds of gloomy reports. They thought destruction was coming, the papacy's coming to America, lockdowns, all kinds of stuff they thought was going to happen when this happened. And it didn't happen. It's very similar to what happened in 67 AD. There was the sign, the flag was raised. And this is what happened on this day, was the papal flag was raised by the United Nations. They were recognized again as a power that had power over the kings of the earth, basically. They raised the flag in the United Nations. But it calls this trip a whirlwind New York visit. You see that in that Catholic New York, it was called the whirlwind New York visit. There's a reason for that, because he's doing the very thing. He's coming like a whirlwind. It's not just that one, not just Catholic New York, but also Pittsburgh Post-Gazette tells us it's a whirlwind visit from Pope Francis. The CBS News New York, down at the bottom left, it says Pope's whirlwind New York tour, right? That's what they were talking about when he came. He's like a rock star that came to New York City. And that's what they thought, is that this is the greatest thing ever. But really, he's gathering armies. He's gathering chariots. He's gathering horsemen. He's gathering ships. He's gathering the United Nations at 10 horns to work on his part, to impose an agenda which is going to come down to eventual Sunday laws. It's an assumption of power that's going to lead up to Sunday laws. So Sunday laws are all coming out of this. But the assumption of power was here. And it's just getting teeth now. It's about to start to really ramp up, right? But again, Pope Francis in the U.S. in pictures. This is the Telegraph. It tells us Pope Francis spent a whirlwind U.S. visit. See the same words right there, right? Same with this one, Eyewitness News 7. Pope Francis whirlwind visit to disrupt transportation. Whirlwind. Armies, 10 horns, abomination of desolation. It's what it is. It's when you see the King of the North coming, flee out of Judea, come out of the cities. Because if you ever saw and understood the UN Agenda 2030, you'd know why God gives you a call to come out of the cities. You'd know why you shouldn't be in the cities right now. And if you are, this is your call. Come out over my people, because it's going to be too late very soon. But anyways, Access WDUN. Pope Francis makes big impression in whirlwind visit to New York City. Highlights of Pope Francis' visit to the United States. New York Times, a whirlwind papal journey. Concludes, a whirlwind papal journey. Whirlwind. He shall come as a whirlwind. Horses, chariots, horsemen. He's gathering them. Pope's whirlwind New York tour comes to an end. Whirlwind tour. Pope Francis begins 39-hour whirlwind visit to New York City. Whirlwind visit. That's WNYC. All these news networks. Reuters. Pope leaves New York City in a whirlwind of events. Fox 6. Like, this isn't just left-wing media. This is right-wing media as well. Whirlwind trip. Pope Francis back in Rome. Catholic News USA. First whirlwind day in U.S. focused on climate change and world reconciliation. USA Today. Vatican. Pope Francis doing fine after whirlwind. Wall Street Journal. Pope Francis. A whirlwind tour of New York City winds down at Madison Square Gardens. 10 horns, gathering armies. Arms shall stand on his part. So there is an assumption of power. You can read about it in the Great Controversy. I know some people say, oh, it's the assumption of power that leads to the Sunday law. So therefore the Sunday law is going to be the sign of the end. No, God gives you a sign to come out of her before that happens. Thank God. Because if you were still in the cities when that happens, that won't be good. God wants you out before. So the sign is given before, as God's people need to understand. But Matthew 24:15, when you see this is a war. It's a war being made. Armies are gathered around Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a symbol of God's church, his woman, in Revelation chapter 12. And Babylon is the one making war, the king of the north, the woman in Revelation 17, using the dragon that she's riding and the 10 horns, which are the United Nations, the kings of the earth. You can read about this. Just go to Revelation chapter 17. And you'll notice it says here, verse 12, the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings which have no kingdom yet. And it talks about this kingdom yet to come. These shall have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. This is the kingdom that's yet to come. No kingdom yet. Some people are wondering, well, there's 5 fallen, one is and one is yet to come. Well, it's right here. It's no kingdom yet. It's the 10 horns. It's verse 12. We just have to read it carefully. It's the United Nations. This is the last kingdom that's going to rule after the United States when it falls. And the United States is going to be controlled by UN troops, Chinese troops. They're going to be in UN uniforms probably, but they're Chinese. The Chinese are the peacekeeping corps of the United Nations. And they will have one mind. All these nations will be of one united mind, united nations, united kings, and they give their power and strength to the devil, the dragon, the beast. You know, you go to the United Nations headquarters and you'll have right in the middle of it Lucifer's trust, the dragon's trust. The dragon is the center of the United Nations. These shall make war with the Lamb. The dragon makes war with the woman. How does he make war? He's got to have armies stand on his part. Arms stand on the papacy's part. So there's a war. When you see armies surrounding Jerusalem, know that the desolation thereof is nigh. That is what it has to do with. So when you're looking at Daniel chapter 11, and I'm going to go into more detail tomorrow, so don't miss tomorrow's meeting because we're going to get into the economic factors that have to do with what's coming. Because there's an economic collapse coming. It says it right in Daniel chapter 11, talking about who has control of this. Let's go to Daniel 11 for a sec. And verse 43, it says, he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. Symbolic, and I'll explain what it is, but no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name or the number of the beast. It has to do with buying or selling. And somebody's going to be in control of the economy here at this latter day. And it's not Turkey, as some people believe. It has to do with the papacy. It has to do with some of the precious things. I'll come over the gold and silver and precious things of Egypt. I'm going to show you what these ships have to do with, because these ships are talking about economic issues. Daniel 11:40. You can see the ships in the book of Revelation chapter 18. You'll notice here in Revelation 18 that in 1 hour is so great riches come to nothing. Every shipmaster in all the company and ships and sailors, and as many as buy or sell or trade by sea stood afar off. See, no man might buy or sell. Somebody's going to be in trouble, and somebody's going to be in control of all the gold and all the silver, and they have control of the ships. And the merchants of the ships stood afar off. What are they doing right now in America, guys? What are the ships doing over on the ports right now? Standing afar off. Standing afar off. Yeah. The ships stood afar off. What's going to happen if the ships stand afar off? It's going to go, we're going to go completely, everything's going to go bankrupt. Everything's going to go bankrupt. Everything's going to shut down. The whole economy is going to shut down. Do you see where we're coming to here? We are this close to that 1 hour where so great riches come to nothing. It could be tomorrow. I don't know. It could be tomorrow, guys. Are you guys ready right now? You know? But it's just, yeah. We have to really, really understand that times are coming here where we're looking at things that are coming to pass, and they could come to pass very quickly. So just be aware. And what's going to happen is that we're going to see the smoke of her burning at one point. And how does she burn? Well, the 10 horns make her desolate, and she shall be burnt with fire. It's all connected together, right? But anyways, I have a couple more slides I want to share just briefly if I can. This has to do with Turkey, okay? Because a lot of people think the king of the north is Turkey. And it says Turkey did come like a restless whirlwind. This is in the book Daniel in the Revelation by Uriah Smith. And some people will say, well, that's who's coming like a whirlwind. And that's what it has to do with, is the whirlwind trip of the turkeys. And the king of North Turkey came against France. And the word against him is not really in the verse, but this is the interpretation that was given by Uriah Smith. But I want you to understand, a lot of people say, well, we believe what the pioneers believe, right? And they really believe that this was the truth. And Ellen White does not agree with Uriah Smith in regards to the king that does according to his will. She does not believe that was France. She believes that was the papacy. But here it says in Word to the Little Flock, page 8, James White, one of the pioneers of the Adventist Church, says this regarding the king of the north. He says, Michael is going to stand up at the time that the last power, that's the king of the north, in Daniel 11, comes to his end, and none to help him. This power is the last that treads down the true church of God. Who is this that treads down the true church of God? Jerusalem, the mother of us all. Who is going to surround Jerusalem and make war with it? It's Babylon. It's the papacy, the king of the north, right? This last power that treads down the saints is brought to view in Revelations 13, verse 11 to 18. His number is 666. Now, for those who believe the pioneers, this is what you have to take into account, that not all the pioneers agreed on a lot of these things. Some things they did not agree on. And sometimes there were certain things that needed more study that weren't fully understood by that time. But it's important for us to really, really consider some things. This is what James White also said. He said, he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Daniel 11:45. That's Daniel 11:45. That's the last chapter. Who is this? Well, some people would say that Palestine is the glorious land, and that the Turkish seat of government, the Ottoman Empire, or whatever they want to say, is to be removed to that land. Well, if that's so, then we will remark, he says, Palestine has had the curse of God resting upon it ever since the death of the Son of God. But the Western continent, America, is now at the time of the fulfillment of the prophecy of the time of the fulfillment of the prophecy, just such a land. Interesting. America. Well, the hearts of men really is Jerusalem. We are the church of the firstborn, and ultimately a papacy sitting in the hearts of these apostates that are sitting in our government, no longer Protestant government. They are supposed to have protest in their heart, Jesus in their heart, because he's a Protestant, the Lamb. And in the heart of the nation right now, someone else is sitting there, and it's the Pope. And he's come to America, and that's exactly what James White prophesied. And it's interesting how these things have come to pass, just as James White prophesied. And it just fulfills Daniel 11 to the core, to every point right there, and exactly what I've shared with you today. So at the time of the end, the king of the south pushes at him, which would be France, 1798, takes away his power. King of the north comes like a whirlwind. He's going to come at the end of time like a whirlwind with chariots, horsemen, many ships. A lot of people put that in the past. I do believe that it was hard to understand until the papacy came. It was probably hard for many people to understand. The pioneers had a hard time understanding it. There were many differences in their time in regards to it. But in this time, it's not hard for us to understand. When we let the Bible interpret itself, when we go to the books of Jeremiah, when we go to the books of Matthew and Revelation, we go to even the writings of Ellen G. White, which she talked about with regards to the sign of the end. She said the sign of the end has to do with the threefold union. The sign of the end spoken of by Daniel the prophet, which is the abomination that maketh desolate, has to do with the threefold union. It has to do with the papacy. It has to do with the papacy getting power. It has to do with America. Threefold union, apostate Protestant America, and spiritualism. Threefold union. And that's spoken of by Daniel the prophet, the sign of the end. And that's exactly what James White said. The Western continent, America, is now, at this time, a fulfillment of the prophecy of just such a land. Jerusalem, the church, right? So that was supposed to be lamb-like. And now out of the mouth proceed the things of the heart, and it's speaking like a dragon. And so the heart is not have that lamb-like characteristic anymore. Instead, the man of sin has sat in the heart of the nation, Washington, D.C., and spoken through it. And this is what we see. The 10 horns make her desolate. Judgments are coming. Judgments are about to fall on the land. And we're about to see these judgments about to fall. It's very, very close right now. But we need to understand. If we don't see it, we don't know it, we don't understand it, we won't know what our instruction is. Flee out of Judea. Come out of Babylon, my people. Come out of her, my people. When you see the 10 horns, make her desolate. We're going to miss out on this last prophecy. It's something that's important for God's people. And a lot of people are looking to the Middle East for a lot of prophecy right now. What does the Sunday keepers look to in regards to trying to find and fulfill prophecy right now? Do they look to what's happening with the papacy? Do they look what has happened with regards to their prophecy and their prophetic eye? They're looking to what's happening in Jerusalem below. And when they applied the books of Amos, Joel, Daniel, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and they look at all these books, and now Daniel, would they apply those books to what is happening in regards to the church? Ellen White said, mark this point with care. The abominations that are done are going to be done in the church. Jerusalem is a symbol of the church, not a symbol of Jerusalem over there in the Middle East. And so this is why the papacy has sent the Jesuits in to redirect our minds with regards to prophecy, including prophecy, preterism, futurism, these types of prophecy, moving the 70 weeks to the future, moving the 70 weeks to the past, moving all the 2,300 days to the past, trying to redirect your mind away from the papacy. The papacy is the central figure of Daniel 7, Daniel 8, and Daniel 11, and Revelation 13 and Revelation 17, and furthermore, it's the main character of prophecy. It is Satan's masterpiece. And Turkey has nothing to do with this masterpiece. That goes like Daniel 8 goes. It talks about the kingdom that's divided to the four winds, north kingdom, and the little horn comes out of the north, and he waxes great, even to these directions, but he does not wax towards the north, because he is the king of the north. That's the papacy, and it's reiterated in Daniel chapter 11. The whole prophecy is repeated. The sanctuary being cleansed and polluted is repeated in that chapter. So we have to understand these things. God has given us understanding these things, and if we fail to understand these things, then we're going to be led away and led astray. We're not going to understand. It's like the stop sign. You'll just go right through the stop sign. When the sign of the end is given, and God shows you what the whirlwind trip is, and you see it and understand it, you'll fail to get out of the cities. You'll fail to come out of the fallen churches, and that's God's message at this time. And it's to be loud. It's to be clear. And God is going to call his people out of Babylon. Again, the sign of the end right here, spoken of by Daniel the prophet. It was given in Matthew 24, and Ellen White says it has to do with Protestantism, stretching her hand across the gulf to grasp the hand of the Roman power, reaching over to grasp the hands with spiritualism. And this is, as the approach of the Roman armies was a sign of the impending destruction of Jerusalem, so may this apostasy be a sign to us that the limit of God's forbearance is reached, that the angel is about to take her flight, and that we're about to enter those scenes described as Jacob's time of trouble. Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. What happens before Daniel 12:1, guys? Daniel 11:40 to 45. So what is she talking about here? The sign spoken of by Daniel the prophet, the abomination of desolation, the northern king. And the northern king is written in Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 1, where it says, when you see this, flee out of Judea. King of the north, Jeremiah 6:1. Flee out of Judea, has to do with Babylon. And that's Jeremiah 6, verse 1, 2, 4 chapters. All these things, you put them together, and they can be easily understood. We have to let the Bible interpret itself. And I know some things, some people have their own interpretations. It's not biblical interpretation, not letting the Bible interpret itself. You can see these things and repeat if you just put these chapters together, such as Matthew 24, Daniel 11, and Revelation 18. You'll see all these symbols and signs put together. There's a little chart here. You can take a copy of the page for yourself. But the glad tidings from the east, right? That's the gospel, Matthew 24:14. It's the lightening the earth with his glory, Revelation 18:1, the gospel. The abomination of desolation, it's also the first angel's message, the gospel. What's the second angel's message? Babylon is fallen, the abomination of desolation, 10 horns, church and state. Matthew 24:15, Daniel 11:41-45, Revelation 16:13, 17, 12, and 13. That's the second angel's message, right? And come out of her, my people. Matthew 24:16, Revelation 18:4. Come out of her. Why? Because you see the sign. You see the church and state union. And you flee out of Judea. You flee out of Babylon. And then the time of trouble. Matthew 24:21, Daniel 12:1. It will be a troublous time. What do we see right after the abomination of desolation? Matthew 24:15, verse 21 tells us, troublous times such as have not been since there was a time. Revelation 18:4, come out of her, my people, that you receive not of her plagues. Plagues are going to fall in the time of trouble. There was a couple more verses, but he comes as a thief. You put those verses together, and there's a connection there. And so all those verses are connected, just as Ellen White connected the threefold union to the sign spoken of by Daniel. But there is no we have to find that in the book of Daniel. And not a lot of people are finding it in the book of Daniel. We have to read more carefully. Anyways, guys, I'm going to close it off here. And if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to share some of those. We can actually discuss them a little bit more if you guys want, and open the book more. I'm going to share more on this tomorrow. And it's going to have to do with some of the things that are happening, as well as the ships. We're going to look at the ships and understand it a little deeper, and some of how this has to do with the central bank digital currencies that are going to come in soon. If we can, let's just bow our heads in prayer, and I'm going to close it off, and then we can have some chat. Heavenly Father, we just want to thank you for being with us here tonight. We thank you for your grace, your kindness, your love. We thank you for your words, and we just ask you, Father, to give us wisdom and understanding. You say in the book of Daniel that the wise shall understand. And I pray, Father, that we are searching in the right way. It says also in that book that we have to go here a little and there a little, precept upon precept, allowing your word to interpret itself. We can't just look at a verse and come up with our own interpretation. Father, I pray that we would learn these principles that you've laid out in your word, so that we would understand really, truly who are these powers in these studies, because, Father, this is your kingdom, and the gospel in the kingdom go together. And that's what you want to reveal to us. We also realize that there are kings of this world, and they've ruled for many years. And Father, you want us to have a discernment and an understanding of your kingdom, especially in light of these kingdoms, that the great controversy is taking place and continuing, and this world is the center of it. And I pray, Father, for more deeper understanding and also more conversion of heart in many of us. And I pray in Jesus' name, amen.